On tonight's show, we go back to Route 66 and continue our road trip series and end it at the Santa Monica Pier in Los Angeles as we continue on historic Route 66. Next on America's #1 road trip television show, it's Jan Scott Tonight.
Mike Pitel was with the State Tourism Office for 22 years, a founding member of the Route 66 Association here in New Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. And also did this incredible map, the best one we've seen yet on New Mexico, and certainly the most definitive map on Route 66. He is also the local expert on Route 66. Is that?
Well, a lot of people tell me I'm an expert, but I just keep asking questions and trying to learn all I can.
Where are we now?
We're on Route 66. It's right behind us. Mm-hmm. Downtown Santa Fe. Most people don't believe that. They think that Santa Fe was never on 66. In fact, there are people who live here and have lived here all their lives who've been mystified that 66 actually passed through here.
Yeah, and you just talk about what's behind us and what Water Street was like in the 1920s. What was the activity like?
There were a lot of small businesses in the area. Santa Fe was a community of about 7,000 or 8,000 people. Directly to the east of us, there was the garage for the Indian Detours buses that came out of the La Fonda. There was a parking garage and a gas station across the street. There was a gas station on this corner, in fact. And behind us in Cafe Pasquale's, there was a series of restaurants, beginning with Bobby Brown's Coffee Shop and moving up through Gus Mitchell's Casey Waffle House, which was here through 64.
Wait, you say it was a gas station before that?
It was a gas station in 1921. I've seen an archival photograph that shows it, but how long the gas station lasted is a little bit beyond me.
Why have all the guidebooks missed Santa Fe on Route 66? What happened there?
Well, I think most of pop culture, most of the books, the TV shows, the trips that people who are still alive remember is the trip west through Albuquerque and not the one that came down from Santa Fe to Los Lunas. That was the earlier portion of the route from 1926 to 1937. And those people today are either all passed away or their children have some vague recollection of it.
Mm-hmm. The road behind us, what was the activity like in the 1920s? What kind of cars came through and what was going on here? What were people thinking when they came down this road and parked in front of Bobby Brown's Coffee House? I mean, what was going on with them?
Well, I think a lot of people were just as enamored of driving their brand new Model Ts that Henry Ford had mass-produced as much as getting out on the open road. It was all a new experience, this automobile tourism. Santa Fe, back in that period, was still getting most of its tourism from the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, which was luring customers here because Fred Harvey had taken over the operation of the La Fonda. But cars were a pretty much new experience here in Santa Fe. New Mexico didn't really establish its first speed limit on the highways until 1951. So that gives you some idea of what's here. And once you move away from Santa Fe, it was pretty much all dirt road back then.
About the cars, the Model Ts, what other cars were out here and what kind of mileage did they get? Do you know?
I don't know what kind of mileage they get. I don't even remember how much miles the Model T would get, but the old Model Ts had a ruler, and you actually dipped the ruler into your gas tank every morning, pulled it out, measured it to determine whether you needed to refill. I think they had about an 8-gallon tank.
What was gas back then in the 1920s? What do you think it was? Do you know what it was a gallon?
I think it was pennies. It had to be. I remember when I was a kid back in the 60s, it was back in the vicinity of 29, 30 cents a gallon.
It's probably around 5 or 10 cents a gallon then.
Maybe, but people could park just about anywhere along the streets. I mean, there weren't any parking meters back then, and people had to worry more about horses and burros laden with firewood from the mountains than anything else.
Now, was Route 66 open 24 hours a day? And what I mean, was Bobby Brown's open 24 hours a day, or the hotels as you came through? If you came through at 1 in the morning or whatever, could you find a place to stay here?
I think you'd have to knock on doors, pretty much. I talked with a fellow who grew up here in Santa Fe back in the 30s, the son of the police chief, and he said the only all-night bite to eat was just a block and a half to the west of us down at the bus depot. All of the police and firemen who would be fighting a fire all night would just go there at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and get a bite to eat because it was the only place open. So I think there were a few places that were open, but not very many.
What did Santa Fe look like back in the 1920s when Route 66 was here? I mean, obviously the buildings that are along Route 66 were there then, but what was the overall, population and size of Santa Fe?
Well, Santa Fe started out around 7,000 around 1926, and by 1937, which was the last year the route went through here, it had grown to about 13,000. Santa Fe was in the midst of a makeover. It was embracing the architectural style of Southwest Pueblo revival, so they were painting a lot of the facades of the Victorian buildings over to mask that. There certainly were not as many portals on the buildings, the shaded walkways on the plaza, but people were pretty much locally neighborhood based. There were a lot of supermarkets and stores and shoe shops and coffee shops and malt shops downtown. The high school was just 2 blocks to the north of us. There was a private school, the Loretto School for Girls, which was started by the Archbishop Jean-Baptiste Lamy in the 1850s. That was about 3 blocks east of us. And just 2 blocks south of the Loretto is the St. Mike's College for Boys that Lamy started. So there was a lot of intense rivalry. The games between the Santa Fe Demons and the St. Michael's Horsemen began to grow during that period. And Santa Fe was still relatively isolated. It was pre-World War II, and it was still looking south to Albuquerque. That was its big connection. And the whole state tended to look south towards Mexico because of its ties through the Camino Real with Old World Spain. It still was not as connected with the rest of the United States as the surrounding states.
In the 1920s, was Santa Fe still a cowboy town? I mean, were there still drives, cattle drives here to Santa Fe?
Oh, no, there were never any cattle drives here to Santa Fe. That was hundreds of miles south of here.
Oh, because I read someplace that people drove right down the Santa Fe Trail and they dumped the cattle into the square. Not true?
Well, those were, when you said cattle, I immediately thought of cattle that were being shipped to market. If you're talking about domesticated cattle, oxen, certainly they were the animals that brought the wagons filled with goods on the Santa Fe Trail, but typical cowboy cattle drives like you'd find in the Fort Worth area, those were hundreds of miles south of here. You wouldn't have any idea they were going on unless the wind shifted.
When you come down the old Santa Fe Trail, there's a sign that says Route 66, but it seems to point you to the square, not down Water Street.
I think there are more signs that need to go up. Turn here, for example. Back in the days of Route 66, Santa Fe was extended only as far south as about where Cordova Road is, which is about a little over a mile south of the plaza. That's where the residential area petered out. And as you go down Cerrillos Road, if you go as far as St. Francis Drive and Cerrillos, where the railroad tracks cross, that's about as far southwest as Santa Fe went back in those days. So it was a very small town.
As we've traveled Route 66 and done this 20-part series, the one thing that I've noticed is that this is, if not the most, one of the most compelling, alive, small cities on the Mother Road, and that roadies are completely missing Route 66 if they bypass Santa Fe and just go through Albuquerque. I mean, this place is just alive.
Well, Santa Fe, I think, can stand alone and can match up well with just about any other major city in the country. And it's always promoted itself as the end of the trail, the oldest capital in the country, and so forth. But as far as embracing its Route 66 history, there is so much earlier history to this place that I think the city fathers have just not really given Route 66 its due, and maybe that will come in time. But certainly people who head west on Route 66 traveling from Chicago to Santa Monica do in fact make it a point to come up to Santa Fe once they get to Albuquerque, just to see the place, unaware perhaps that Santa Fe was on the original route.
What happened to Santa Fe when in 1938 when Route 66 bypassed Santa Fe, and this whole, 106 miles or 123 miles?
It was 106 miles that was taken away, and this sine curve was eliminated at last. But January 1, 1938, when it was officially shifted east to west to what most people remember today, Santa Fe was nonplussed. It didn't miss a beat. It just went on being Santa Fe.
Really? Did not miss a beat?
Did not miss a beat. I think that most people who traveled to this place to visit it as a tourist destination came from Albuquerque, came from the north, from Taos. There was a very strong connection, strong business ties with Albuquerque. The road was fairly well developed. All of that continued. And Albuquerque, of course, continued to grow as a tourism destination, tripling in population right after World War II. So, summer of 1926, a young writer named Paul Horgan was bounding up the stairs and came across Willa Cather, who was in the midst of writing Death Comes for the Archbishop, one of her lesser-known novels nationally, but certainly the most popular novel here in Santa Fe. It's still the most popular book purchased in the La Fonda bookstore. And he was immediately admonished, and he was embarrassed and beat a hasty retreat and recalled that years later. Well, Cather's book, Death Comes for the Archbishop, was about a fictional Archbishop of Santa Fe by the name of Latour. Latour was modeled on the figure of Jean-Baptiste Lamy, the original Archbishop. 49 years later, Paul Horgan, who is no longer a young writer but quite successful, publishes Lamy of Santa Fe. It wins the Pulitzer Prize for Literature. It's about the actual figure who built the cathedral and established the Loretto School for Girls and St. Mike's School for Boys. So I think it's poetic justice for Paul Horgan to have said touché. And you can see the cyclical nature and also the attractiveness of Santa Fe to artists and writers and musicians and painters and the like.
How dangerous was the road? What was it like south of Santa Fe to Albuquerque? I mean, you talk about some of the, pretty descriptive. It's the most dangerous.
When I worked for the State Tourism Office, I would get letters occasionally from people describing this terrible hill that they remember traveling up or down in the back seat of their parents' car between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. What was it and where was it? Well, it took me a while to figure out it was La Bajada Hill, and if you've ever seen it, it has a couple dozen switchbacks. It's an engineering marvel to have held up so well over the years. People who traveled it remembered that as the single most harrowing point of their trip west. They would head to California and remember this in particular. It wasn't a surprise to me when I found out why. I drove out to the south rim of La Bajada Mesa and looked 500 feet down at the Santa Fe River. I saw sky, and I hadn't seen that since I traveled back down the slopes of Haleakala in Maui. You still have that sense of, where's up, where's down, where's left and right, and you sort of lose your bearings momentarily. It must have been difficult for people who lived on the Great Plains to have traveled west for hundreds of miles, and now at last they're looking down at something and they can see it almost from a two-dimensional perspective. The tops of trees as two dimensions. It's like the Wile E. Coyote scene where he falls from the cliff and all you see is the river and he disappears and there's a poof. It's the same sort of appearance. And people who traveled would tell me that they would have to walk down the hill behind their father's trucks or cars because they'd have to ride the brakes so much that these cloth brakes would catch fire, and guys would just jump out of the car and start throwing sand on the brakes just to put the fires out. And it was tough getting by, but it was just wide enough for two cars to squeeze by and probably shake hands at the same time.
People wrecked on that road?
People wrecked on the road. There were numerous accidents there. There was a sign at the top that said, "Hey, you guys, this is a difficult trip, but if you're careful, you can do it. But people who were at the top just freaked. And there were people in Santa Fe who waited in their cars and said, hey, you want me to drive your car to the bottom of the hill for a small amount of money? Several people took them up on it. So they would drive down, those people would wait below for somebody going up the hill. It's just like when you're skiing. It always looks steeper from the top down than from the bottom up, but it was still a difficult road.
What was I going to say? What was did people drive at night? What was night driving like?
I think most people avoided night driving. I think you touched upon that earlier when you said where business is open 24 hours a day, that this whole concept of service really didn't begin to emerge until the 50s and 60s. There was a gas station down at the bottom. The next comfort station was at Santo Domingo, Pueblo. Beyond that, it was Bernalillo, but you're talking dozens of miles. There are a handful of people still left. Tony Magnardo, who's now 88 years old, was a driver of one of the buses for Indian Detours that started at the Fonda Hotel here back in the 20s. He remembers driving the switchbacks of 66. He said he didn't have a problem driving it. He had a commendation for perfect driving record over 14 years. He said La Bajada didn't give him a problem. It was the arroyos down below that did, because they would frequently flood, and he would have to wait until the water subsided before he continued. He usually averaged about 3.5 to 4.5 hours on the trip from the La Fonda here to downtown Albuquerque to the old Alvarado Hotel. And we get out to La Bajada now in 20 minutes. It took me by back road, by SUV, just last fall, 50 minutes to get to the rim of La Bajada. So you have an idea there of how much better and safer roads are today than there were back then.
For SUV traveling, if you're a four-wheeler, I mean, is it much of a grade to go up there?
It's 7%, which I think is enough. I think you have more of a problem with the roughness of the road, occasional washouts. Probably have to get up and rebuild certain sections of the road just to get across certain places. And there's the curves themselves. You've got two different angles. You've got a high center of gravity, so you've got to negotiate them carefully. SUVs are fairly short. You can do that a lot easier than you could in those 18-passenger white buses back in the 30s.
Oh my God, that's.
There are some books about Santa Fe, then as now. John and Barbara Sherman, their book, shows some of Santa Fe back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and involve streets that were actually Route 66. But your best bet is to go to the archives at the Fray Angelico Chavez Memorial Library, a half a block north of the plaza, or out at the State Archives behind the old National Guard Armory off of Cerrillos Road, southwest of here.
Should I go to the City Council and say, City Council, let's get the rest of Route 66 signed here in Santa Fe? I mean, yeah, I do pretty well up in Boulder. I just will keep going to City Council meetings until they address an issue. And perhaps maybe I should come down here and beat on them a little.
You've obviously never been to any of Santa Fe's City Council meetings. I think a person has to cut his teeth somewhere else in order to get ready for the bigs here.
What do they carry guns or what? Are the City Council meetings televised in Santa Fe?
You can't carry guns until July, and then it's a local ordinance.
What?
There's a new law in the state that went on the books that takes effect in July, which says that people will be able to carry concealed weapons, but it's all left up to local governments to vote yay or nay, or to put it to popular vote.
Well, okay. What's this? Are the City Council meetings televised in Santa Fe?
They're not televised, but they do appear on the news occasionally.
Oh, so these guys hide. The City Council hides. Because in Boulder they don't hide. Everything's on television.
City Council appears under the aegis of sports, not news.
Do people get up and yell at City Council meetings and go, "What are you doing?"
Only the more restrained people in the audience.
Oh, so it's pretty much a gunfight then. every meeting.
It's the second best show in town. The best is the legislature every January.
Oh, now, how often does City Council meet here?
City Council meets once a month.
Is it City Council's responsibility to get the historic Route 66 signs up here?
Well, I think it's the city tourism industry's responsibility to address it.
What are they thinking? Here you have the most beautiful city, most restored city on Route 66, and they don't even have the city properly signed. You said that these Route 66 signs just went up a month ago?
Locally, yes, but for a city that welcomes 1 million people every year and sometimes has problems finding sufficient parking for all of them, their question would be, so we need one more thing to promote?
Well, but the hotels told me that tourism's down, and that and sometimes they need they're just, some of them are just, they're barely making it. Is that not true?
I don't know. I think I'll leave that to them to respond to. But I think that Santa Fe eventually embraces all aspects of whatever it can do to sell itself as a tourist destination, and it's an inevitability.
But if you look at the want ads in the newspaper, there are not that many job ads in the local newspaper. As like in Boulder, we have probably 4 pages of them.
I think people hustle here. People have 3 or 4 jobs at the same time, and it's highly competitive. You have here in Santa Fe about 125 restaurants, about 200 art galleries, about 40 places to stay, not including all the bed and breakfasts. It's a great destination.
Well, they're missing all the Japanese and European tourists that come here every year. There's over 1 million people a year that come on Route 66 from Chicago to L.A. And to me, well, I mean, it is, they've missed the mother road. They've missed the whole, migration from east to west to California.
Well, if you subscribe to the philosophy that the mother road is the mother lode, then the answer is yes. But I think it's a matter of simply taking this to the Santa Fe Convention Visitor Bureau and the Lodgers Association and saying, hey guys, come on, let's do something.
Well, yeah, I've noticed, like, we've been to some of the different restaurants and talked to people that are on Route 66, and a lot of them, well, first of all, we're not completely familiar with the history of the highway, or the signing, or the fact that, 1997, didn't President Clinton designated Route 66 as America's historic highway? Didn't they call it the Mother Road?
There was something like that came out of the White House about a year or two ago.
That's where all these signs came from.
National treasures. No, the signs actually came from the Highway Department. But it was federally funded. Scenic byway funds.
Yes, federally funded. But if you look across the country now, all the new signs that are up, the historic Route 66 signs, all look the same. I think that came from the $3 million that Clinton. I think they bought all the signs. I think they paid for them.
I don't know, but I know there's $10 million out there that can be spent on Route 66 over the next 10 years by the 8 states, and how that all distills out into the various projects remains to be seen. But I can certainly tell you that, having traveled Route 66 in New Mexico, there are places that got their signs up first, and other places that got their signs up last, and still other places that still haven't gotten their signs up. And the ones who got theirs up first discovered that they were being taken down, appropriated, shall we say, and they would have to go out after other funds to replace those. So the more signs you put up, the more apt they are to be taken down.
Steve Wimmer is the concierge here at La Fonda, and he knows more about Route 66 than anybody in Santa Fe except for Mike Pitel, right?
Where's Route 66? Because Route 66, went down our side street here in the 20s, and then when they redid it in the early 30s, it took it away from Santa Fe, so we lost the original Route 66 charm. And I do understand from a local ranch owner here that when they filmed one of the series with Buzz and...
Oh, yeah.
See, there goes my mind.
Buzz and whatever, yeah.
Buzz and whatever.
Because they were taking LSD on that particular TV show.
Could have been. Yes, it was the 60s.
Do you remember the LSD episode?
No.
Buzz was trying to throw himself up a building. And
there was a scene where they had a fight and they were thrown out of a window here on Old Santa Fe Trail for that TV series. And I think in that period, probably the most exceptional event in this hotel, socially, was the marriage of Zsa Zsa Gabor to Conrad Hilton in the early 40s. So they
Zsa got married.
got here in this hotel.
Yeah.
It was Easter weekend. They bought every white lily in town. So I always say in Suite 500, this is where Zsa Gabor spent one of her many honeymoons.
Oh yeah. So this obviously is it's a Route 66 bus tour, right?
Right, exactly. And at this time we were, on Route 66.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of the Harvey cars from the Harvey Corporation. And we were a Harvey Hotel from the early 20s until the current corporation bought it.
Here's the question everybody has been asking me for the past 5 years as I've done this Route 66 series. Were the Harvey girls...
Oh, no.
Every hooker I talk to says that the girls in Japan are, they're prostitutes. So I'm kind of wondering if...
What station is this?
This is the real Route 66.
Okay,
this is where we get all the dirt on everybody.
I think you would have to say that the Harvey girls made sex safe in the West. Because up to the point that the Harvey girls turned up here,
Yeah.
I think the word was soiled doves. We're pretty much made up the female population in a lot of these Western towns.
What
And
do you mean they made sex safe? They
didn't have it.
Oh, I thought maybe they started phone sex.
No, I don't. Right, smoke signal sex at that time. Right. So
Telegraph
they were the first,
sex.
they had a very strict code of morals they had to adhere to, and they were from very nice families.
I'm like, what's the matter with me?
And I don't want to name names because the granddaughter told me this. The assistant chef here in La Fonda had an assignation with a Harvey girl, and they were both forced to leave the hotel. And this was in early 30s.
As we are about to be in a few minutes, as Jim stares over here at me, what kind of TV show is this?
They had to leave the hotel. The Harvey Corporation did not put up with this, and they eventually did get married and had children and delightful granddaughter that had a shop in Albuquerque. So
Was there a time of prostitution here at La Fonda?
I don't know, one evening a group of Thais came in and asked for 14, and I said, if I looked over the whole state, I don't think. This is a wonderful brochure published by Mike Pitel about Route 66, its history in New Mexico, with a map and city maps, and
Let's hold it right up so people can see.
quite a nice historical document. Pictures of historic buildings, a lot of which are, of course, in Albuquerque because Route 66 was the main street.
Okay.
And so published by our friend Mike Pitel, the leading expert in New Mexico on Route 66, is this wonderful multi-page brochure with the history of the road, the towns it went through, and some architectural pictures of some of the buildings that still exist. And this is available from the hotels in Santa Fe and the Tourist Information Center. And then, this is quite nice, this is a little passport to travel along Route 66, and you get it stamped like you were going through, the different towns. And it says, to whom it may concern, you are hereby permitted to let the citizen herein name pass without delay or hindrance down Route 66, and in case of need, give all lawful aid and protection. Well, let's get one thing straight. The Harvey girls were decent women, and Billy the Kid did not play the piano in the bar at La Fonda. If the Pilgrims had come up the Rio Grande, La Fonda would have been here to welcome them.
Hello. Hi.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Excellent. Checking in with us today?
Yes, we are. This is the Inn of the Anasazi. The Inn of the Anasazi, just off the plaza on Route 66 in Santa Fe, built in 1990, but using 1,000-year-old mud and stone Pueblo architecture. A small luxury hotel influenced by Spanish and Anasazi architecture is certainly a mention and a consideration on any trip down Route 66 or weekend stay in Santa Fe. Here, also, it's a mention in Bob Moore's Route 66 travel book, and just off 66. But we're going to have a look at some of the design. Our continuing coverage of Route 66 here in Santa Fe, Jan Scott's Route 66 TV show.